Appetite for Horror.
Oh, hello, creeps. You're right on time for your appointment.
Welcome to the podcast Appetite for Horror, episode number 7, the first one of 2023. Can I still say, because it's 2 weeks into January, can I say, Jason, Happy New Year to you, or is it too late?
You can say it. I might look with like confusion on my face, but no. I think odd numbers are somehow weird to me whenever it turns to like an odd number here.
Yeah,
23 just doesn't seem right.
It doesn't flow yet. 2022 flowed, 2024. You know what? Now I'm thinking about it. I started it's funny, the last episode on the Mothership podcast that I do, Appetite for Distortion, I interviewed Max Cavalera of Soulfly, and that's up to 385. Because like the way 385 sounds.
Mm-hmm.
But here we had a long way to go. Episode 7, first of New Year. Really happy to have, which I hope is going to be one of many appearances on Appetite for Horror. Jace, he's like, let's get through this.
No, that's great. No, I'm excited. This is cool. I love guesting on people's podcasts. I'll do any podcast anytime.
Right on. So Jason Stein of Dads from the Crypt podcast. Welcome.
Thank you.
You have a wonderful beard. I need to say that if you're watching this on the Appetite for Distortion podcast page, which has Appetite for Horror on YouTube. You have a nice, I'm getting my grays in there. They're coming out. I'm going to be 40 this year. But
oh, there you go. Yeah, once you hit 40 and once you have kids, you just let the beard go, man. There's too many other things to worry about in life.
We'll talk about that because that's the unique thing, the dads from the Crypt. And I'm going to be a dad in April.
I know, it's really exciting.
Yeah. You know, all the, I guess, the cliche stuff of nerves, anxious, excited, can I do this? I just got to keep it alive.
Yeah, it's not a matter of can, it's just doing.
Yeah.
you fake it until you make it.
And you wonder if it's going to become, like my wife said, we just hope we have a cool kid. Like, what if it's evil like Damien? What do we do? What do we do there?
I mean, we can get into all that, but I really don't think that kids are, quote, evil. They just, different challenges.
Well,
and especially coming from a parent of a special needs child.
Okay. I told her what this kid's going to be cool because I'm going to make sure it watches horror movies growing up. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to start off with like, the Human Centipede and stuff, but, Monster Squad and things like that. I'll be a responsible horror parent.
If we're going to dive right into it, it's when you become a parent as a horror fan, you look at things with a totally different lens.
Okay.
When I was a kid, I watched, the original It, and it scared the crap out of me because I was like around the same age as those kids when they came out. And, you're like, crap, this could happen to me. Then when the new one came out and I can't remember exactly how old my kids were. They're a bit younger. They're 8 now. So you can do your own math. But I was scared of it as a parent thinking about this happening to my kids. So like it just totally shifts your perspective.
Okay.
How you watch things. And then movies like Monster Squad, which is an amazing movie, really fun, but then like, oh, do I really want my kids to hear some of this language? I'm like, at what age am I okay with that? And it's weird because I'm very anti-censorship, but on the other hand, I think my generation or whatever, whoever we fit into, I just turned 42. We grew up on watching a lot of things that were kind of TV censored without knowing it. So like I remember watching like The Predator and a lot of those movies on network TV where they censored out a lot of the gore, a lot of
That's a great point.
stuff.
Yeah.
And then you rewatch it and I'm like, okay, that's what they originally meant. So I don't believe that they should be censoring, but it'd be interesting to have those options available. So I could watch like with a 12 when I have a son who's now 17, but I was like, when he was a little bit younger, like 5 years ago, I would have totally shown him like the TV version of Predator, but maybe not the actual version of Predator,
Yeah, that's funny. Or how about to make it all, tie that in together, Tales from the Cryptkeeper.
Yeah.
You can do that. But you're right, because what I loved about, and this, I'll reference one of the early episodes, it might have been episode 3 or 4. I had a friend on of yours, Al Katz, one of the producers of Tales from the Crypt and writers and Bordello of Blood. And I told him the story, and we're talking a bit off the air, because you mentioned, because you said you're 42.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because I'm 39 technically, but just the cutoff where I did grow up with Tales from the Crypt, but I just don't remember a lot. So
Right.
oddly, because I just moved with my wife, and what is going to be my radio room is now going to be the baby room, and that's fine. I got to figure out, what to, I had to figure out what to watch, get things situated here in the house, and we didn't have a smart TV set up, so I just started watching old Tales from the Crypt episodes on YouTube, and you forget, or at least I did, you know they were bloody, but just the amount of tits, ass in there, and I grew up with that. So you're right. I wouldn't necessarily want my kid, even when I was 12 or 13, when this stuff was on, watching that. But it's a different era, so maybe they'll be desensitized already.
Yeah, well, again, also, like, if I'm going to talk about my Tales experience, they put them on syndication on Fox in the somewhere mid 90s. I don't know exactly what year, but a couple years after the original show was running. And that's right around time that I was starting into watching Saturday Night Live. So
Yeah.
I'd want to stay up to watch Saturday Night Live, and you're just flipping through channels, and there was like a slot, I think, either right before, because there's always Mad TV took the slot before Saturday Night Live. So I think, I mean, there was a time in between where they were showing edited episodes of Tales from the Crypt again on broadcast TV. So they were like slightly edited down,
Okay.
but still kept a lot of the intensity, but not as much, boobs and blood. And that was kind of my first real exposure. And there's one episode in particular, The Arrival, scared me so much that I must have been in middle school or something like that. I was not like a kid. I stayed up most of the night with the light on, so I was so scared.
That's how I was growing up too, a little bit, getting scared watching these things. I think that I thought I was doing something wrong by watching Tales from the Crypt. I liked it.
That's the whole point.
Yeah, well, that is the whole point. Right now, it's interesting, like you said, perspective. When you become a parent, or as I've gotten older, I look at these things, they're harmless. I laugh at half the things you're supposed to be scared at. So it really is horror is a lot about perspective. So I would love to know, as I kind of have to plan how I'm going to continue to do podcasts and just live my life with the small child. He's going to be my co-host, I assume, at some point, hopefully sleeping. But how did you start Dads from the Crypt? Because I was talking to Outcats about you guys, and he loved that, what you do, in addition to, of course, talking about what he does, Tales from the Crypt, that you're all dads in this. So
yeah,
so podcast.
Yeah, so like I said, I was a Tales from the Crypt fan when I was younger. And then, it took me a little while to get into horror, because I grew up on like the monster horror, the Universal monsters, the King Kongs, the Godzillas, but not as much like the 80s slasher stuff. That scared me too much.
Okay.
Until Scream came out, and that was kind of my awakening. I saw it 3 times in the theater, twice. I thought 3 times in 1 week. 2 of those were the same night. I did the thing where you stay in the theater till the next showing.
Oh wow. Okay.
And my friends worked at the theater, so they didn't care.
Oh. That's cool though. I've never done that. Never thought to do that.
Yeah, there used to be a website that I used to use that would tell you could like look at a theater and see what movies were like ending. When a movie was ending, another one was starting, so you could sneak into the other one. Yeah,
I'm sure there's an app for that now or something.
Oh yeah. So I was been a horror fan for a long time, and then I started doing some blogging when that was kind of a big thing back in like 2007, 2008ish. And I had like a blog. It was not very good, called Jason Takes Portland. I was living in Portland, Oregon at the time.
I like it.
And I had an idea of reviewing every episode of Tales from the Crypt, but I'm not the best writer in the world, so like it took me a long time to write reviews for things. And then I ended up moving to California, and things just became way too busy, so I let that go. Fast forward, I started listening to this podcast called Bloody Good Horror, which is been around for a very long time. I think like 15 years, something like that.
Okay.
And I was doing a job where I did a lot of data entry or data correction, where I could turn off a lot of parts of my brain to just do the work. but I needed like I was trying to find something to excite the other parts of my brain. I got into podcasts.
Yeah, that's why podcasts have become huge. There are a lot of jobs like that.
Yeah. So I was listening to a lot of Kevin Smith podcasts. I was looking for horror. So I fell in with the Blake the horror one. And it's one of those ones where you've been listening to these guys for so long, you just become familiar with their lives and stuff. And like, you become invested in the person more than the show almost. It was just like a weekly check-in with your friends, with your group of friends. And that's kind of what it felt like.
That's a sign of a good podcast. That's what I try to do. It's like you're just talking to your buddy. I don't drink, but it's supposed to be like you're hanging out at a bar.
Yeah.
Too many interviews, because I've done straight interviews with big names, Alice Cooper and Dave Mustaine, and they've been interviewed so many times about so many things, but you want to sense a connection in that small window you have, so it is, it's an art. It's hard to do. So, right on.
Well, that's the nugget right there, is it's really about making a connection with your audience.
Yep.
Yeah. And your co-hosts. So that was around the time when I started going to horror conventions. And one of the things that they do on Blake Horror is that they have like bumpers where someone says, "Oh, hi, I'm so-and-so from blah, blah," and you're listening to Bloody Good Horror. Because the guy who runs it, Eric Knoll, is an audio engineer, or he does like audio professionally. So he's really good at the editing and producing and everything. So it occurred to me that they haven't updated their bumpers in a while. I'm going to these conventions and they're getting a little monotonous. So I messaged him and said, "Hey, if I go and bring my phone and get people to record bumpers for you, would you want to use them?" He's like, "Yeah, sure." So I started doing that for a couple of years, and they would send me like a t-shirt. And eventually I had all their t-shirts. And then they started a Slack community for Patreons. So I'm like, "Oh, hey, can I just get a Patreon account and we'll just call it even from now on?" He's like, "Yeah, sure." So that's when I first got into like their little Slack group, but it was a little overwhelming, all these people at once. But then, of all things, pandemic hit, and suddenly you're like craving any social interaction you can get your hands on. So I became like super into their Slack group and became really good friends with a lot of people. Then what we started doing was every Saturday we would do trivia night, like a horror trivia group, and that was like my social event for the week during pandemic. And through that, it was run by this guy named Jody. And this other guy, Mondo, was always there. Three of us became really good friends. And then I had my 40th birthday, so it was about 2 years ago. And it was on January 6th, so it was Insurrection Day. So it was a lot of, it was a bit crazy. But it's one of those things, once you turn 40, you're like, what am I doing? What do I want to do?
Yeah.
And, I was kind of like thinking about, podcasts would be kind of cool. And I started looking at it, and I think technology has gotten to a point where you don't need a ton to do it.
It's true.
At least just to get it done. You don't need, the bar is relatively low at this point.
It is. I only have a crazy setup because I actually work in radio, but in general, you can just do it right on your phone.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not going to be great, but you can do it. And the hosting is relatively easy right now. So I had this idea. I talked to a couple different friends and nothing quite panned out. And then a friend from Bloody Good Horror named Caitlin started her show called Plug It Up, which is about the horror feminine, and a lot of things on that path. So I'm like, you know what? If she can do it, I bet I can get 3 guys and do what she does up by herself. She's so great at it. So I talked to Mondo and Jody, and I had this idea about doing a Tales to Crypt show. And because I'm me, I made a PowerPoint presentation.
Wow.
To show them, because that's kind of how my brain likes to express ideas. So I made the PowerPoint.
I'm impressed. I didn't see the presentation. I'm already impressed.
Yeah, we keep joking we should put down our Patreon as like the ultimate. You can see the actual presentation.
You should.
And they both said, you had us at Tales from the Crypt podcast. Like, you need to say anything, but good. I'm my day job. I'm a project manager, so I have to think all these things through. So I'm like, if I'm going to do a Tales from the Crypt podcast, I'm going to do it the best I can, and take it to the limit. And I made up a bunch of ideas for the name. Some of them were like assholes from the crypt, ales from the crypts. But the dad one really kind of stuck, because all 3 of us did happen to be dads. And, there's something inherently dad pun about, the Cryptkeeper, obviously.
You're right.
So I'll just kind of, they're like, "Oh, no, that's obviously it." And it all kind of organically happened, and even more organically, I happen to select not select, but Jody happens to be a graphic designer, so we can like whip out any like artwork I request from him for every episode. So it's really cool to have like custom art for each episode.
Yeah, I like that about your show. You have good artwork. Yeah.
And also if I just come up with a crazy idea, like for Hanukkah, I'm like, you know what? There's no real Jewish horror t-shirts. I want a t-shirt with Freddy Krueger with candles instead of fingers.
What? I haven't seen this.
I'll send it to you. Yeah, it's the picture of him with the hypodermic needle saying "want to get high," but he photoshopped candles onto it and it says "want to get high" on the bottom.
I need to see that, man. We are on the same level. You have my sense of humor. Oh man.
And what's funny is I put it up on was it Redbubble or something like that.
Yeah.
And I ordered some stickers and a t-shirt very quickly because I had a feeling, and it did happen, that it got copyrighted very quickly.
But
they still sent my order. They still sent the order. So I was like, okay, you know what? If I get one of these shirts in existence, I'm golden. Brilliant. So yeah, Jody's amazing. And Mondo is a very technical guy. He does a lot of IT stuff. So he's fine doing all the editing, all the sound, mixing, everything, because I don't have much of an ear for sound. I even like listening to myself talk. So I'm happy to record and never have to listen to it again, which I know a lot of people in the podcast community are like, oh, editing just takes so much out of me and everything. And I'm like, I lucked in so much having someone to just hand things off to. And then that frees me up to do all the they said if you do all the organizational, all the social media, all the guests and things, we'll stick to our stuff and we'll be fine.
You got a good team over there.
I know, I couldn't have asked for anything better.
Oh man, I'm jealous because I started the Appetite for Distortion one with a co-host, and we kind of split duties, even though I felt I was doing more. And then now with this horror, it's all by myself, and it's wow. You're making me feel like I need a co-host or something. Wow, you have a good team there.
And it's weird because we never met each other in person. I've only met Mondo 6 months. Was it 6 months ago? Something like that.
Were you guys all spread out?
Yeah, so I'm in Los Angeles, Mondo's in Vegas, and Jody's in Tennessee.
Oh wow.
So
okay.
I spend tons of time, and we've bonded greatly over this podcast. But I've never met Jody in person. I've only had beers with Mondo for like a couple hours. But we're spilling our guts to each other.
Well, that's the beauty of what this medium has become. We were talking off the air before we started recording, because I've been in radio for 20 years, didn't understand podcasting at all. Completely different now. But last 5, 6 years, 7 years, it's really blown up. So it's completely different now. And one of the things that has helped me change my viewpoint, like today is a great example. You are face-to-face able to meet people, and it feels like they're right here with you, and develop these relationships. I fear for, as a soon-to-be dad and your dad, that when you're a kid, if that's all you have, then you're obsessed with it. You don't need any real physical interaction. But the purposes of what this is, and to, I don't know about you, it helps you find people in a community that you normally wouldn't be able to find. It's not like my friends are into horror or into Guns N' Roses like I am. It's helped me find people, and that's the purpose of this podcast. I know it's the purpose of yours, to meet other Tales from the Crypt fans that not just from other states but other countries as well. And I always find that fascinating, how people from other countries, they become invested and love the same thing that I do with a completely different upbringing. So you're right on, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's great because it brings people together, and also it's great for like interviews and guests and stuff, because I can have, if people, I think someone with some amount of notoriety, celebrity, whatever you want to call it, it was more comfortable going on a Zoom. They would be coming to like my house, or like come to my studio and be on my podcasts. I think Zoom is a lot easier. For them.
Well, it all would have been just like phoners, as we call them, over the phone, and we both know that's not the same. It really isn't. It's fine, but it's not as personable. You're not looking at the person. You can't see their nonverbal cues. So, who are some of the guests that you've had on?
Oh my God. So my goal when I started the podcast was to go, because the guests are just so amazing on these episodes. So I went through IMDb and I got an IMDb Pro accounts. So which you can find people's agents and whatever contacts they put in. So that's a huge tip. If you're doing a podcast and you are interested in interviews, IMDb Pro is your best friend.
Interesting. I'd never even considered that because I use whatever radio connections or going on websites and just trying to do what I can. But no, that's smart. See, that's your PowerPoint brain.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And trust me, for every 50 emails I send, I don't know what the exact ratio is, but like I send dozens and dozens of emails. I might get one response that says, "Oh, we're not interested. Oh, we don't have any scheduling available." That's fine. Emails don't cost anything.
Right.
People don't look at emails probably as significantly as like a phone call or whatever, but it's easier for me to send out, 10 emails in a couple minutes. Just copy.
Sure.
I have like a form. I have like a template I use over and over again. I
Gotcha.
tailor somewhat, but at least like I can
Same
just copy
thing.
and paste.
Same thing. And I feel a phone, sometimes it's too personal unless they're expecting you. Like, I don't like getting phone calls from people that I don't know. And
well, like to agents and stuff, they're used to that.
Well, I guess that's fair. That's fair.
But so yeah, the first interviews I sent out, first interview request I really sent out was to John Kassir, who does the voice of the Cryptkeeper, and to William Sadler, who did he was in the very first episode and he starred in Demon Knight.
Okay.
And I got yeses almost immediately.
Wow.
And I thought, like, did I send it to like a prank account? Like, I did not expect that. So that's my first thought was like, is this for real? And then my second thought was, wait, how do I do an interview? It didn't really occur to me, like, what does it take to do an interview?
That's really funny.
It's one of those, like, you just kind of like going through it, but you didn't really like think it all the way through. So, and they were like, is Thursday okay? And I'm like, oh, yeah, sure, Thursday great. Wait, what? That's 2 days. What am I going to do? So I talked to some people who have done interviews, and I listened to some people who do interviews. Oh, I'm a big Mark Maron fan.
Yeah, he's cool.
I just like how in depth and unique his interviews are. Like, I don't know if whether you're a fan of him personally. He's a great interviewer. And
I don't regularly listen to his WTF podcast, but I'm a fan of his comedy. I did like that show Maron when it was on. Yeah, no, it's his interview style is kind of like, it's funny. Now we're getting paid for it. So I can say, because it's Jason Stein, I'm Brandon Weissler. Mark, it's kind of like the old Jew complaining and talking about, he talks about being in therapy, like I've talked about, and your issues and depression. You're bonding with somebody famous, essentially.
Right.
So I enjoy that style of interview rather than just a Q&A.
Right. Or like, I watched some of the hot ones I was told to listen to. Okay. Because what he's doing there is he's asking questions, but he's not asking the obvious questions. He's asking like the third question that you would ask, like down a line of questioning. He's like, oh, so tell me about your new movie. Well, everyone knows about the new movie. What is something interesting about that movie that you want to talk about? So that's kind of how I try to infuse some of that. So yeah, my first interview is with John Kassir, and what's funny is, again, I must have prepared like 40 questions for John Kassir. We had like 45 minutes, but I'm like, I'd rather have too many questions. What I know now is that John Kassir is an amazing improvist, and he just has that spark of energy that just keeps going and going and going. So he talked almost the entire time nonstop, but to the point where I was like falling over laughing because he's so goddamn funny. Such a nice guy. I only got to like 5 questions because he just covered most of it just in terms of him just talking. That's just kind of like his stick. And like, he did improv and he did like one man show. So he can just go and go and go. He did a bit on the One Man Wizard of Oz where he played all the characters. He just did that for a few minutes just as an example. That was like trying not to like fall over laughing. It was amazing.
He's a brilliant actor and character actor. Yeah, that's cool. When I saw that you had him on, I was like, wow. And just to hear the steps that you took as a non-radio person, and like, oh, I love that, the aspiration that you have just because you love this TV show, and to get the voice of Tales from the Crypt, and you didn't expect it, how humble, you didn't expect anything, and how well it went. I just think that's really cool. And the beauty of doing a podcast, and because it's not like you can just turn on the radio and they'll be talking about Tales from the Crypt. Many of us want to talk about it, and you did it coming from the heart, and you're right out of the gate, right out
No,
of the
my
Cryptkeeper's gate. You're getting them.
yeah, my gratitude is, off the charts of like everyone that's taken any time. And we've talked to, a bunch of directors and actors who've been on the episodes. These are people who might not have like really done much in a long time. And that's part of it, is like I want this to be like kind of a living document or living testimony about the show. And like, people only getting older, so many are, we're losing so many people as we go. And I said, I didn't want it to be just a show of like, yeah, that was a cool episode. Oh no, that episode sucked. So I want it to be more than that. And again, that's why, we do a song of the day. We pair a song. And Mondo, again, he's much more eloquent than I am, I think. He can just talk. He just talks about a band, some Swedish metal band I've never heard of, and like talk about some great story behind them and how it relates to the episode. And I can just sit back and just let him go. And I love it.
There is a lot to talk about with this show. And just like with Al Katz, I did not expect to spend nearly 2 hours with him, but there's so much to unpack. And I think that's really awesome that you are dedicating, that we are getting this time capsule. Because watching these, I mean, I hope they get professionally released one day, but they're all up on YouTube. And thanks to the people who put them up on YouTube, it really is a time machine back to that decade and what was important, how society viewed certain things, the sense of humor. And I just, like I said, I grew up with Tales of the Crypt, but maybe those 2 years made a difference where I just completely forgot the amount of A-list actors that are on this show. It's almost as exciting as, you're going to see the Cryptkeeper, and you can't wait to hear what dad jokes he's going to say. You can't wait to see what practical effects they're going to do and how scary the episode is going to be. But who's going to be on this episode? It's going to make it unique. And that's really, really special, I think, about this show. Do you have I guess maybe favorite? I know the favorite episode is a cliche question, but maybe favorite guest stars over the years on Tales from the Crypt?
Man, favorite guest star. Well, let me just say again, think of it this way, like not everyone had HBO back then, and there was no Twitter or social media, so you didn't know who was going to show up in this week's episode. You just kind of like, you just went in blind, which again is something that we're all kind of addicted to knowing what's going to happen in every movie, and like who's going to be the next Marvel cameo, etc. But back then you just went for the ride.
Right.
There's always some what I love is the background people. So like in the episode For Crying Out Loud, you got Iggy Pop in the background, rocking the concert, or you have like Heavy D on Dead Man's Chest. Roy Brocksmith was just a great character. There's so many great character actors. That's
well, let's talk about, because I did my homework. I did during my binge watch the 2 episodes you just mentioned, For Crying Out Loud and On Dead Man's Chest, but I rewatched them before this episode. And that was kind of like one of the episodes, just as my casual viewing, I was like, wait, who's in this? So I gotta remember I don't cross over these episodes. So let's do On Dead Man's Chest. That's with Yul Vasquez.
yes,
It's a very almost like a Guns N' Roses 80s sleaze rocker story, which speaks to me.
Right, that's why I sent that to you, because I knew that you'd dig that.
Thank you. And Tia Carrera from Wayne's World, who gives a very, very realistic death performance, her eyes rolling back in her head when she gets killed. But when you see Greg Allman come out of nowhere, as the bookie, as the the venue owner, and out of nowhere, Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols. It's like, what? Like, where are these people coming from? Like, how did they sign up? So it's like how when I spoke to Al Katz about Slash, because they are like background characters. You're right, but big ass names who just want to be involved in the show somehow. So I think that is really cool.
I think Tales from the Crypt just became like the in thing to do, and especially like if you are thinking about crossing over into acting, it was a great place to at least just appear, and like hopefully somebody would watch and say, oh, okay, maybe I should put Steve Jones in this. He was good in that bit. And like they didn't really get paid anything for these, but again, it was exposure. And they were open to having, if it fit the mood, having these people on.
Heavy D though, who's also in that. I'm not a huge hip hop fan, but Heavy D's, nothing but love for you. I mean, I was all about that in the 90s, and he was really good as the tattoo artist in that episode. So if people aren't like, obviously Jason has seen every episode, I don't know how many times. Is that an accurate statement, or am I actually
I don't know if I've seen every single episode. I'm sure I have at some point in my life, but I'm not the type of person that sit there and watch every episode over and over and over again. I would watch my favorites.
Okay.
So
I'm not going to be like a Trekkie, be like, well, I know in season 2, episode 13.
No, I mean,
okay,
the ones that we've done so far, I have a pretty, because I do so much research into these. I'm sure I've retained a lot of knowledge, but before I started the show, I'm sure there's bigger Tales from the Crypt fans out there. I have no doubt there's someone who's watched it way more than me, yada, yada, yada. So I'm not pretending to be the Tales from the Crypt super fan, but it's more through more of expressing the love of the show and putting myself out there to make the show happen that become ingrained in this.
I'm with you. That's why I don't consider myself the biggest Guns N' Roses fan in the world. I just had the passion and the ability to do this. And you, again, Mr. PowerPoint, you did this, and the passion is there to put this together. And that's why I do, and I'm sure you do, rely on your listeners to help you out and help build the show. An integral part, of course, of doing a podcast. To talk about, because again, it's right on the tip of my the forehead, in front of my brain, on Dead Man's Chest. Some great, what I love about horror in general are the practical effects, and why I usually go back to watching an 80s or 90s, horror rather than something new today, because it's a visual, it takes me out of it. If it's too much green screen, I don't like it. I don't recall ever seeing a dragon pop out of anyone's chest before. That was an incredible scene. Do you ever like rewatch these episodes and you're like, are you like, oh, I remember that? Or did that, like, for me, that blew me away recently. This old episode of Tales from the Crypt, I was like, this fucking dragon's coming out of his chest and he's fighting this dragon, he's cutting his skin off. I'm like, whoa. This is an awesome. Again, it's awesome.
I think, like I said, a lot of these I saw originally edited for TV. So when I'm watching them, sometimes something might pop up. Like I'm trying to remember, was that in the original I saw back in the day, or is this something I'm seeing for the first time unedited because it's all just kind of meshed up? And also, this episode, let's not forget, was directed by William Friedkin of The Exorcist and many, many other things.
Okay, so
we have like a master director of horror doing this episode, and Tia Carrera is synonymous with kind of the Wayne's World, the heavy metal scene, and she was in the Dead Easy script read we did. We can talk about that later, but when people sent screenshots of the Zoom, I was next to her, so like on the Zoom dial. So it just, even that was like mind-boggling. But she's super nice.
Are you gonna make a locket around your neck with her picture? Okay.
No, not going that far with it, but it was pretty damn cool.
All right, it's between us. That's okay.
Okay.
The other episode you brought up, and I just watched today as we're recording this, for crying out loud, where you do have Iggy Pop, who just turned 75, just put out a new album. So the fact that he's still killing it, I wonder, I don't know if you spoke about this episode specifically. I want to know if it was his choice, the writer's choice, when his line came, like every other word was literally fuck.
Yeah.
Every other word, like it was on purpose, almost.
Yeah, I mean,
it was pretty funny to see him like that.
Oh, yeah. And then Sam Kinison is like very punk as far as his comedy goes, I think. Might be a good word to describe that.
Yeah, and so that's what you could do with Tales from the Crypt. So they had like a character actor. I mentioned, a lot of A-list actors have done this show. Like, Schwarzenegger, everybody, is the A-list of every 90s person you could think of has done Tales from the Crypt. But it's those character actors that get the opportunity to star in their own thing because they are a little offbeat and this is the show. So you got Lee Arenberg, I'm not sure how to pronounce it.
I think it's Arenberg. I did an interview with him. He's a great guy.
Oh, awesome. Because he was Mikey from Seinfeld. I also remember him that for the parking lot.
Yep.
Very cool. So he was brilliant in this. And to have his conscience be played by Sam Kinison, the right voice to be screaming and slowly go insane. And Katie Seagal, who is still killing it to this day, back then when she was back then, I didn't know if it was, I'm like, am I supposed to find Peg Bundy hot? Because the way they dress her up and everything, like, no, she is hot.
Yes, she is.
An episode she's proven that she's hot.
Can't confirm.
So just another brilliant episode. Maybe I'm biased because I'm a rock and roll guy, but these are brilliant episodes. And it's not just because of all the TNA that they show. I just think the book ending from the Crypt Keeper, where you see him dressing up like the Beatles, or you see him dressing up like Elvis. It's just very cool. This is just what a cool show. And I'm really glad that, there's a podcast dedicated to this and what you're doing with it.
Yeah. And that's, I think, the secret formula for Tales from the Crypt. If you can have a banger of an opening and closing from the Crypt Keeper, the episode can be not great sometimes. And sometimes they're not, they just don't gel. But if you start off on a high note, end on a high note, people will still leave happy.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
And like I said, I've watched every episode. We're almost to season 6 right now. So we've seen enough of them. And there's definitely some I wasn't a fan of. I wouldn't say I hated them, but borderline might hate them, but they're like your children. You love them all in different ways.
Well, actually, let me ask the cliche question then. What are I don't know if you have a favorite, but what are some of your favorites?
There's one, I think there's one with a love potion plot line.
Okay.
And let's see. Love potion.
I'm
blanking
that's
on the name.
Part of me doing the binge, they all meld together. So I'm like, I know I've seen that one.
Tales from the Crypt. This is great podcasting right now.
I do
Love to Death.
Oh, okay.
So it's one about this guy, and he's like wants this woman, and he like gets a love potion. Oh, it just doesn't work. And sometimes, and that's the thing, sometimes an actor can elevate an okay script, but if you have not great script and not great actors, or just don't understand the campiness of it, it just kind of falls flat a little bit.
You know what? I didn't like that one either with Andrew McCarthy and Mario Hemingway, who were good actors, but I remember just not being into that episode. So yeah, right on.
So that's kind of the go-to, because I remember we're all, and also like in this day and age, a love potion just is like really cringe in a way. Like it's just doesn't really. And again, I know I'm trying to take these all like within the time context and everything, not trying to be too harsh, but
sure.
Sometimes as far as my personal enjoyment, I'm like,
No, I got you. I like when people go insane. Like I think it was what's the actors? I always screw up his last name, but Joe Pantoliano. Yeah. Oh
yeah, I mean, dig that. I mean, if you were going to ask me my favorite episodes, I'm just going to answer just so you don't have to ask the cliche question.
Yep.
But Yellow is probably my all-time favorite. It's just epic on a scope of none of the other episodes ever really reach. It's just amazing film. Dig That Cat with Joe Pants is up there definitely. I like I said, the Arrival, just because it's the scariest in my opinion, and the one with what's his name, Top Billing with John Lovitz.
Ooh,
that's another one. I if I can remember almost verbatim from like when I was a kid, that definitely means something. And that's got the guy who played Gomez Adams, John Astin. It's such an amazing performance in that.
You're right. And as I'm sorry, if you're watching this on Zoom, I had like a coughing attack. The Crypt Keeper's trying to get me.
I just kept talking to make sure you had time to.
Thank you for that.
I got you to assist.
Yeah, obviously nothing would happen if you're listening on the podcast, but I like to acknowledge when these things happen, so I'm not dying. Yeah. As then also I'm looking up just Googling things. Carrying Death.
Yes,
such a great episode. Again, like this is just, it's so fun, and we'll talk. I appreciate your invite on your podcast, and we'll do it when the time is right for you guys talking about this Slash episode where you played a DJ, a radio DJ. So that certainly speaks to me a bit. But just a brief appearance, but still that the story from Al Katz goes that he just hung out on the set for days, regardless, just wanted to be a part of it.
Sure.
So So very, very special there. Any guests, like wish list guests that you want to have? And also what can we expect from you guys that is going to happen?
Oh man. Wish list like fans or wish list people that were on the show?
I guess people that were on the show. I mean, right out of the gate, sounds like you've gotten amazing people. I don't know, John.
Yeah, I mean, we had the guy who played Doomsday from Animal House. I'm blanking on his name, but okay, what's his name? Bruce McGill.
Okay.
He was amazing. People have always wanted any of the I've always wanted one of the executive producers. So obviously, rest in peace, Dick Donner. We can weren't able to get him, but like Robert Zemeckis, Walter Hill. I'm blanking on the other guys. I know I should know this. But yeah, any of those guys would be just really round out the whole thing. But my one like major like person who I'm sure is a fan that I'd love to have on the show someday would be Kirk Hammett. So I'm a huge Metallica fan. They're like, I've seen them 4 times. I went to their 40th anniversary concert last fall and it was magical. He even did a screening of The Black Cat, and he had Bela Lugosi's granddaughter or daughter, oh no, grandson, and Sarah Karloff, who I believe is Boris Karloff's daughter, there for the screening. So that was a really cool night just to see him there talking with them and presenting the movie.
Yeah, that's Kirk Hammett. That's something I've talked about on my GNR podcast. Like, to talk about just a fan of horror is sometimes like cooler than talking to them about what they're known for. Would you rather talk about Kirk Hammett about Metallica or about horror movies?
That's a tough one because they're both. I'm sure he'd much rather talk about horror, but
right. That's how kind of I feel. That I think Slash maybe he likes talking about gear, but to talk about horror films, I think is pretty special. And yeah, it's not just the people that are on the show; it's the fans of the show. It's the fans of the genre, because it is a big community, and I'm jumping into it, this horror community, and you guys have been killing it. So where are you guys on? All the usual podcast platforms?
Yeah, I mean, we just go through the Anchor app, so that feeds into pretty much everything. And if there's one you can't find us on, let us know, and we'll see what we can do. I
appreciate you telling me that we were not on Spotify yet. Thank you.
Yeah, that's kind of my I don't really care per se, but about what app I use. It's just all my music. I have the subscription for my music, so it's just easier to have all my podcast stuff there. So I was like looking for your stuff to listen, and I wasn't sure if you were exclusive to iHeartRadio or not.
No, I appreciate you, because the way I upload it through Spreaker, which is through iHeart, and it goes out to other apps, Google and Amazon, but that was Spotify wasn't one of them. So I want more people to hear. I want to talk to more horror fans. This is a community that I really have no one to talk to about. My friends are not in. I have one friend that's into horror as much as I am. My wife, no, she is scared to death. I'm lucky that this is like pushing the envelope. She's watching Breaking Bad for the first time.
Oh, wow.
And there are certain things that scare her from that. And that's like breaking, and that's not a scary show.
No, my wife does not like horror. When we were first dating, the movie Let the Right One In, the Swedish version, came out.
Okay.
And that's right around the same time Twilight was big. So I told her, oh, there's a Swedish movie. It's got kids who are vampires. I hear it's kind of like Twilight, and I hadn't seen it, so I had no real idea what it was like. And that's the first and last horror movie I've ever taken her to a movie to see, because she was grabbing onto it, which I guess ended up being a good thing in the end. But
right, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's funny, because my wife is obsessed with Twilight. Obsessed. I at the beginning, I'm like, do I want to start dating this girl? I was kidding. Twilight and Dave Matthews, but I love her to death anyway. So I thought that we could watch some horror films with vampires, but she's still no. It's too much for her. So I do appreciate, but this gives me an excuse to give this story as as you mentioned, you learn about people on a podcast, not just always the interview, but I will drop in nuggets about myself, so you learn about me. I don't know if I've said this story on 2 separate occasions. I completely cock blocked myself from getting laid by putting on a house of 1,000 corpses.
Oh, yeah, I'll do it.
No, it was actually one time it was House of 1,000 Corpses. She fell asleep on me. And the other one who just changed her mind and just like, oh, I can't do this. It was, why am I forgetting the name? It was that big double feature. It was Quentin Tarantino.
Grindhouse.
Yeah, what was the zombie one? Why am I not Planet Terror?
Planet of Terror.
Planet Terror. I
Yeah.
put on Planet Terror. That did not get her in the mood. But I'm like, what? This is a great movie. Nope.
Yeah, I think I
No.
must have done that with American Psycho a couple times, and again, not a great idea looking back.
So yeah, we always, I said, she said, what do you want to watch? Whatever you want to watch. I've learned since those days. That's why I'm married now. I've learned whatever you want to watch. I do not pick anymore.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes like on my birthday, she'll let me choose. I get to choose something that might push her boundary a little bit. So we watched The Menu this year, and she really liked it. So
she'll occasionally, like if her sister's like, oh, you should see The Menu or something like that. It's a little obscure. We watched, which I was surprised. It was on Netflix. It wasn't completely a foreign film, but it was like the platform. They would go to different platforms.
Yeah.
And
I've heard of that.
It was very good. It was very dark and it was a little brutal. So, but she must have just been in the mood. I'm like, you like this? Oh, we got to start watching more. No, that was kind of like a one-off thing that she, sat through. But
yeah, I think she likes Snowpiercer a lot.
Okay.
So I was surprised. Again, I was surprised by that, but sometimes you catch them in a good mood.
Well, how about this? She also loves Hunger Games, and I'm very happy to know that she's watched Battle Royale.
Oh, wow. Yeah, my wife really likes Hunger Games, but I don't think she would like Battle Royale.
Yeah, she wouldn't watch it again, but I know she's seen it. So I'm like, all right, I'm impressed. You at least know what it's based on and everything. So this gave me an excuse. I appreciate you saying that to talk about some more horror experiences in my life, in our life. So
yeah, sometimes if I'm doing a podcast and I have to watch a movie, I might like invite her, use that excuse to invite her. So I finally got her to watch Sleepaway Camp, which is like it's just like a personal favorite of mine.
Okay.
It's probably one of my go-to like favorite horror movies.
Love it
for all the wrong reasons, but not wrong reasons, but like despite a lot of the controversy around it.
Oh, true. Well, I've said on this podcast, and I'll tell you, my favorite horror is Killer Clowns from Outer Space. So no judgment anywhere.
Great one.
Yeah, so it's my palate is very unique when it comes to this genre. But as I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, Jason, you were invited back to talk about Tales from the Crypt or horror anytime you want, man. I really enjoyed talking to you today.
Likewise.
So, yeah, that does it for this episode of Appetite for Horror. Please follow us on social media. Twitter and Instagram, Appetite 4 Horror, and Facebook, Appetite FOR. I should probably change them all to be the same thing. But anyway, Appetite for Horror. We're now on Spotify, thanks to Jason, but wherever you're listening, we appreciate it. If you want to watch this, again, we're on the Appetite for Distortion podcast YouTube page. That's the home base. Guns N' Roses podcast. Have a couple episodes out there already for this year. I had Mike Portnoy, who Extreme Theater, Current Winery Dogs, and Max Cavalera, Soulfly, talking about Guns N' Roses and a lot of other cool things that they're doing, metal, and sometimes horror comes up organically. Like I've had people like Danny Filth from Cradle of Filth. I had him on to talk about his horror movie Baphomet. It's Baphomet. It's always hard to pronounce that, but within that spoke about Guns N' Roses, like with CM Punk. I had CM Punk on. We spoke about the girl on the third floor. He gave me a great Guns N' Roses story about seeing them. So there is some horror stuff as well on there. And I'm trying to figure out a way to close this podcast. I think I'm going to do it keep doing it since you're here. In the words of the Cryptkeeper, until next time, boils and ghouls.